This video is about evidence of evolution, and I just wanted to go back and stress about the similarity in anatomy between these four types of animals and how it supports the descent with modification, so that you see how the bone structure in each of these would seem to indicate that they share some kind of ancestor in the past, because the bone structure is similar, even though these the hand, the penguin flipper, the alligator foot, and the wing of a bat all have different functions, but they're still made with the same bone structure. Okay, so the first piece of evidence for evolution is called homologous features. If you remember homologous from grade 10 when we talked about chromosomes, homologous chromosomes, these are the chromosomes that have the same genes, not necessarily the same version of each gene, but the same genes between your mom and your dad, which come together to form that homologous pair. So homologous features are similar features that originated in a shared ancestor. An example of that would be the finch's beaks. So they share a common origin in an ancestral species, but they might have been modified over time through adaptation to look different now. So the beaks of the Galapagos finches is an example of homologous features. Also, going back to this diagram, the bone structures are also homologous features. So they indicate, like I said, a common ancestor, but have evolved over time to look physically different, but still have a similar structure. The other kind of feature is called analogous features. They have the same function and they look alike, but they have very different embryological development. A really easy example of analogous features are the wings of birds versus the wings of insects. So they might look similar and they have exactly the same function, which is to enable flight. But if you actually look into the structure and the like how the wings develop from an embryological standpoint, even just looking at the structure here, like you know that the forelimbs, like the arms of the bird, are the wings, but for an insect, it's not a part of any appendage. It's actually separate. Like if you were to like take a bird and give them just regular arms and then have the wings attached to their back, that's what an insect wing is. So they look similar, they have the same function, but they have very different origins. They're not related at all. And here we have vestigial features. These are parts of an organisms or structures that don't have a function. For human beings, we have our tailbone, the coccyx, and our appendix. These are things that are kind of like residual structures, which are in the process of being eliminated through evolution. But what they do is they tell us something about our ancestry. So we wouldn't have a tailbone for no reason. So that means that somewhere back in our history, we have an ancestor that had a tail, and over time, we just got rid of it. So they show structures that were useful to an ancestor, but they are no longer useful. But they do give us clues about our evolution.
Unless you've had it removed, you, like every other person in the world, have an appendix, which is a kind of a stupid thing to have in your body. It doesn't do much. It kind of cuddles with your intestines. I imagine your intestines don't mind having someone to cuddle with. It does provide that function. It also holds on to some gut bacteria, which is nice. But it pretty much does nothing for your entire life until the day when suddenly it has an uprising and decides to kill you. The appendix, along with some other completely useless things in your body, like wisdom teeth and your tailbone, well, they did not escape the notice of one Mr. Charles Darwin. He was a scientist You may have heard of him. So Darwin wrote this book. It was kind of important, called On the Origin of Species. And in that book, he said that these things were vestiges of bygone eras. Times when the ancestors of humans somewhere down the line had a use for a tail or some extra teeth for chewing meat or an organ to process a bunch of plant cellulose. Now, Darwin here was not the first person to notice that humans, as well as some other animals, are tricked out with various equipment that they don't need. Darwin suggested that animals evolve within a certain set of circumstances, and they develop body parts based on those circumstances. But when those circumstances go away, those body parts, they fall into disuse. But physical evidence will remain. And the amazing thing is that he was totally right. They're called vestigial structures. They're not always organs, so we say structures. And they're basically one of the many things about our bodies that leads us to believe that we evolved from other species. Here are some other examples of cool vestigial structures that we have. Goosebumps. Goosebumps are a reflex rather than an organ, but they are considered to be vestigial in humans. The pilomotor reflex is this thing that happens when a bird or mammal gets cold and wants to warm up, or when it sees a predator and it wants to warn that predator to step off. There's this tiny little muscle at the base of every single hair follicle that will contract and pull the hair erect. Just because I said erect, that's not funny. And for a bird or a dog, that might help it get all puffy and look bigger to a predator, hold on to more air so it can stay warm. The tailbone. Our tailbone, or the coccyx, is this little vestige of a tail, because our ancestors used to have tails, and I'm sure Stan won't mind if we show off his butt here. And there you have a little tail. Can you get a zoom in on it? Zoom in on it. Yeah. See? A little butt tail there. Got a little tail. And so do you. That was excellent work. You're a really good actor. We see tailbones in all great apes, and we even see them in the fossilized remains of our ancestors all the way back to the Miocene period, when our ancestors were first trying to grab onto things with their newly opposable thumbs. So now all we have is this tiny itty-bitty stuff of a tail. But it is not totally useless. That little bone is now the anchor to which all of the muscles that help us control our continence, if you know what I mean, are stuck to. So thanks, tailbone. That is an important job, and I appreciate it. And our final vestigial structure, the wisdom teeth. We humans have become such delicate flowers that our mouths no longer have room for all the teeth we need in order to eat all of that woolly mammoth meat that we don't eat anymore. So now that people are all agricultural and omnivorous, and we generally tend to cook our food well, our jaws are now too small to accommodate all of the teeth that grow into them, and that results in modern humans frequently getting impacted wisdom teeth. I actually have one of mine left, because they took out 3 and they couldn't get one. They left the hole, but also the tooth was still there. So I'm worried about this happening to me. But 35% of people born today do not have wisdom teeth at all. So we are actually on an evolutionary trajectory to get rid of them completely, which I'm totally in favor of. Of course, people with wisdom teeth would have to die and not breed in order to not pass on that gene. And I failed at that, sorry. And actually one more, to end things on a slightly creepier note. You know this membrane that kind of just hangs out in the corner of your eye? Well, that is probably a vestige of something called a nictating membrane, which birds still have to this day, and is in fact a third and fourth eyelid. Thanks for watching SciShow. If you haven't, go to youtube.com/SciShow and subscribe, because we're very...
Okay, blah, blah. So he gave their examples of vestigial features that are in human beings, including that really weird little membrane thing that sticks in the corner of your eye. The nictating membrane, if you have a cat, that's the one where they start to sleep and it kind of comes out of the corner and it covers their eye, makes them look all creepy. Frogs have it. Other reptiles have it. Not that frogs are reptiles because they're amphibians, but basically this third membrane that comes and keeps the eye moist. Anyway, more evidence for evolution is similarities in embryology. I mean, just looking at this picture here, you cannot deny that these have some kind of evolutionary relationship between an amphibian, reptile, bird, and mammal, because the embryos just look so similar. I just saw a story a couple days ago that there's a member of the American government who has come out saying she doesn't believe in evolution, and I'm just like, why? Anyway, so these are all very similar, even though you might think like, what the hell does a mammal have to do with a reptile or an amphibian? But these are all part of the same phylum called Chordata. These are all animals that have vertebrae or a backbone. And so, yeah, you can say that they're more related than invertebrates like octopus or squid or sea cucumber. that don't have vertebrae. So these are going to share more similarities in structure than we do with those other invertebrate animals. So the more similar you see in features, then obviously the more recent the common ancestor is. The more similar the form, the more recent the common ancestor. This also applies to the molecular level, which means proteins, DNA, and RNA. For an example, a hemoglobin molecule, hold on, I gotta get my iPad out because I can't read behind my video window. A hemoglobin molecule is made up of 4 peptide chains, 2 alpha chains of 141 amino acid residues each, and 2 beta chains with 146 amino acid residues each. So 4 polypeptide chains, 2 that have 141 amino acids and 2 that have 146. So the amino acid sequence between species for hemoglobin is similar. Between a human and a gorilla, the hemoglobin amino acid sequence is different by only 1 amino acid. And between a human and a frog, it's only 67 amino acids different. So considering you have whatever 141 times 2 plus 146 times 2, and whatever that number is, and then that 67 difference between a human and a frog is pretty significant.